Let me ask you something. Have you ever said yes to something when every cell in your body was screaming no? Or agreed to a request that you knew would drain you, but you did it anyway because you didn't want to disappoint someone? Or maybe you've set a boundary before. You actually said the words out loud, but then when someone pushed back or looked disappointed, you caved in. Here's what I know. If you're a high achieving woman, you're probably really good at taking care of everyone else. But when it comes to protecting your own time, your energy, your peace, how good are you? You feel guilty, selfish, like you're letting people down. And that's costing you more than you realize. I'm Patty Ferreira, and today we're talking about how to set boundaries without feeling guilty, and more importantly, how to actually keep them. Because here's the truth, boundaries aren't optional. If you want success with satisfaction, boundaries, they're fundamental. Okay, so let's start with basics. What is a boundary? Most people think boundaries are about saying no and yes. That's definitely a part of it. But boundaries are actually about deciding what's acceptable and what's not in your relationships, your work, and your life. A boundary is the line between what you're available for and what you're not available for. It's you saying, this is what works for me, this is what doesn't. Now here's what most women don't realize. Boundaries aren't just about the things you say out loud. There are invisible boundaries as well. Let me give you some examples. An invisible boundary is deciding, I'm not going to take on another person's emotions. Like your business partner is in a bad mood, and normally you'd spend the whole day managing their feelings, walking on eggshells, trying to fix it or not trigger them. But an invisible boundary says, their mood is theirs. I can be compassionate without making it my responsibility to fix. Another invisible boundary, not getting entangled in someone else's drama. Someone vents to you for 45 minutes. You hang up exhausted, like their problems are now yours to solve. An invisible boundary says, I can listen with compassion, but I'm not carrying this for you. Here's another one. Learning the difference between being kind and giving away your power. You can be compassionate without abandoning yourself. You can be generous without letting people cross your line. There's an invisible boundary there, and a lot of my clients struggle to see it. They think, if I set a boundary, I'm being mean. But that's not true. That's not the case. Setting a boundary isn't mean. It's honest. It's generous, actually. It's you saying, I care about you, and I also care about me. And here's the part that's hard to hear. When you don't set boundaries, you're not actually being kind. You're building resentment. You're abandoning yourself. You're teaching people that your needs don't matter. And eventually, you explode, or you burn out, or you disappear. So boundaries, visible and invisible, are how you stay in right relationship with yourself and with others. Now, if boundaries are so important, why don't we set them? Let me tell you about two clients. The first one, let's call her Amy, suffers from what I call go along to get along syndrome. She smiles, she says yes, she avoids what I call courageous conversations. She came to me because she'd finally set a boundary with her family. She decided she wasn't going to do something that was expected of her by her family and her loved ones. This caused her a strain. Her parents were disappointed and there was tension in the home. And Amy felt terrible. She said to me, Patty, I feel so guilty. My boundary is costing them hardship. Maybe I should just go back to the way things were and just make it easy. And here's what I told her. Self-care is about making decisions that are in the highest good for you. Not for sometimes, not for others. It's for you always. Your primary responsibility is to yourself, not to manage everyone else's feelings about your choices. That doesn't mean you don't care about them. It means you stop abandoning yourself for their comfort. Because here's the truth. When you set a boundary, some people will be disappointed. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because they benefited from you having no boundaries. And now that's changing. And change is uncomfortable. But their discomfort is not your responsibility to fix. Let me tell you about another client, Sarah. Sarah runs a service-based business. She has a process, steps that need to happen in a specific order for her clients to get amazing results. But she had a client who was feeling inconvenience. She said she didn't have a lot of time. She wanted to skip some steps. And Sarah, because she was afraid of losing the client, said, yes, it's okay. Even though she knew skipping those steps would create problems later, which would impact results. So when she came to me, I reframed it like this. Keeping your process isn't about being difficult. It's about being in the highest service of your client and your client's results. If your client doesn't see that, it's because you need to find a better way to express it. Or it's a sign that she's not the right client anymore. This isn't about your convenience or hers. This is about your ability to lead. This is about your leadership skills. And that landed for Sarah. Because the issue wasn't the boundary. The issue was that she didn't believe she had the right to hold it. She thought, who am I to insist on my process? But the truth is, you're the expert. You're the leader. Your process and the part that you have of leadership is holding the line even when it's uncomfortable. So why do you avoid boundaries? We avoid them because we're afraid of disappointing people, being seen as difficult, losing relationships, being judged as selfish. But here's what I need you to understand. Those fears, they're keeping you small. They're keeping you exhausted. They're keeping you from the success and satisfaction you actually want. Now, here's something I wish someone had taught me earlier in my career. Not every situation needs the same boundary. There are 3 levels, and learning which one to use, when, and where is a skill you get to develop. Let me explain. Level 1, the soft boundary. I call this the conversation, right? Rose petals talks. This is where you clearly communicate what's a yes and what's a no with a warning. An example, I'm happy to help with this project, but I can only give you 2 hours this week. If it needs more than that, we'll need to revisit the timeline. Calling them in and sharing your warning. Or, I love spending time with you, but I need to leave by 8 p.m. to get enough sleep. This is a boundary with flexibility. It's collaborative, it's gentle. And for a lot of situations, this is all you need. That boundary will take care of your exchange. Level 2, the medium boundary, I call it the limited access. This is where you reduce someone's access to you. You're not cutting them off completely, but you're putting up a fence, right? A limitation. An example, I don't take calls after 6 p.m. anymore. Or I need 48 hours notice for a meeting. Or I'm no longer available for last minute requests. This boundary has less flexibility. It's firmer. It's saying this is what works for me and I'm not negotiating. Level 3 is the hard boundary. I call this the brick wall, right? The barbed wire. This is where you completely remove access. An example, I'm no longer attending events where alcohol is involved. Or I've decided not to work with clients who don't respect my process, so we're ending this engagement. Or I'm stepping back from this relationship. It's not healthy for me anymore. This boundary is non-negotiable, it's final, and it's you saying, this is enough. Now here's the mistake I made, and I see a lot of women making this as well. I went from no boundaries to brick wall. I skipped the middle levels. For years, I had no boundaries. I said yes to everything. I avoided confrontation. I went along to get along. And then one day, I'd had enough. But instead of having a conversation, instead of setting a soft boundary with a clear warning, I went straight to brick wall, barbed wire. I'd wait until I was so angry, so resentful, so burned out that I'd explode or completely shut down. And that cost me relationships. It cost me trust. It made me feel misaligned with myself, because most situations don't need a brick wall right away. Most situations need a conversation first. The skill is learning to match the boundary to the situation and showing up for it, and not misdiagnosing the boundary, not building a brick wall when what you need is a fence, and not putting up a fence when you actually need a wall. Getting good at all three levels of boundaries and knowing when to use each one, that's what works. And it's a practice. You don't get it perfect right away, but the more you do it, the more you get good at it. Now here's the part most people don't talk about. Setting the boundary is only half of the work. The other half is holding it. Let me explain what I mean. I hear this all the time from clients. They'll say something like, I told them I didn't like that and they did it anyway, right? And my response is always, okay, and then what did you do? And there's crickets. Because here's the truth. A boundary without a consequence is just a suggestion. If you say, I don't want you to call me after 9 p.m., and then someone calls you at 10 p.m. and you answer, you just taught them that your boundary doesn't actually matter. Holding a boundary means staying vigilant to the expectation or agreement you created. And it means following through with a consequence when that boundary is crossed. Let me give you an example. Amy, the client I mentioned earlier, she set a boundary with her family. But the first time they pushed back, she almost caved. She almost gave in. She thought, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should just go back to the way things were. And I said, no. This is the part where you hold your boundary. You already communicated the boundary. Now you have to show them and yourself that you mean it. So when her parents kept bringing it up, she said, I understand this is hard for you, and I'm not changing my mind. We'll have to work through it. She didn't defend. She didn't justify. She didn't over-explain. She just repeated the boundary calmly and firmly. And eventually they stopped pushing. They stopped testing the limits because they realized she wasn't budging. Here's another example. Sarah, the business owner with the process, after we worked together, she had another client try to skip steps as well. And this time, instead of caving in, she said, I understand that you want to move quickly, and I also know that these steps won't serve you in the long run. This is how I work. If it doesn't align with what you need, I completely understand, but I won't compromise the process. And you know what happened? The client respected her more for holding that boundary. She followed the process and she got better results because Sarah held the boundary. She didn't just state it, she kept it. And that's the difference. So if you're going to set a boundary, you also have to be willing to enforce force it. That might mean letting someone be disappointed, ending a client relationship, not answering the phone after a certain time, even if it rings and rings, walking away from a conversation that crosses the line. Holding the boundary is harder than setting it, but it's also where your power is. Because when you hold a boundary, you're showing yourself and everyone else that your needs matter, that you're not available to be walked over. This is awesome. That you're serious about protecting your peace. Now let me talk about what happens when you don't set boundaries. Because this isn't just about feeling uncomfortable or guilty. This is about your success and your satisfaction and fulfillment. Let me tell you what I see when women don't set a boundary. Women who have no boundaries, they're building a business or a life on a crumbling foundation. I call it quicksand. They're saying yes to everything, taking on too much, over-delivering, people-pleasing. And from the outside, it looks like they're doing great. But on the inside, they're exhausted, resentful, and burnt out. And here's what happens to their success. They miss opportunities because they're too busy with things that don't really matter for the long run. They can't scale their business because they're doing everyone else's job. They're burnt out right before a big breakthrough, and then they have to give up. They say yes to projects that drain them and no to projects that would light them up. Their business stalls, not because they're not talented, but because they have no boundaries around their time, their energy, and their capacity. And here's what happens to their satisfaction. They resent the people they love. They can't enjoy their wins because they're already on to the next crisis. They feel like a martyr in their own life. They look at everything they've built and think, this should feel better. Why doesn't it feel better? Because you can't build satisfaction without boundaries. I'm going to say that again. You can't build satisfaction without boundaries. You can achieve without boundaries for a while, but you can't sustain it. And you definitely can't enjoy it. Because when you have no boundaries, you're abandoning yourself. You're sabotaging your vision. You're saying everyone else needs more than me. And that will destroy your satisfaction faster than anything else. So if you want success with satisfaction, not just success at any cost, you need boundaries. Not as a nice to have, as a foundational, fundamental building block. Without them, the walls to your success will start to crumble. And eventually, the whole thing collapses. So here's what I want you to walk away with today. Boundaries are not selfish. They're not mean. They're not about punishing people or pushing them away. Boundaries are about being in right relationship with yourself and with others. When you set a boundary, you're saying, I value you and I value me, and I'm going to honor both. You're not choosing between yourself and others. You're choosing alignment. And here's what I've learned. The people who truly care about you will respect your boundaries. They might be surprised at first. They might push back a little. But if they love you, they will adjust. And the people who don't respect your boundaries, they were never respecting you to begin with. They were benefiting from your lack of boundaries. And when you change that, they get uncomfortable. But that's not your problem to solve. Your job is to protect your peace, your energy, your vision. Your job is to stop abandoning yourself. And boundaries are how you do that. So let me leave you with this. You get to decide what you're available for and what you're not. You get to say no without explanations. You get to change your mind. You get to put yourself first. Not sometimes, always. because you can't pour from an empty cup. And you can't build a life you love if you're constantly giving yourself away. Boundaries aren't about building walls to keep people out. They're about creating space for you to thrive. And that's not selfish. That's self-honoring. That's self-care in its truest form. If this resonates with you, I want to invite you into two things. First, join the free 21-day Season of Self-Love Challenge. Day 16 of the challenge is all about setting a boundary without guilt. We walk through the exact steps. You'll get a script, you can practice it, and you'll be able to do it. It's free, and I'm going to include the link in the description. Second, if you want ongoing support, if you're ready to get really good at setting and holding boundaries, join Awakened and Rising. It's my $30 per month membership for high-achieving women who are done abandoning themselves. We work on boundaries every single week. We practice the 3 levels. We help each other hold them. You get weekly live calls, a community of women who get it, and tools that actually work. Again, the link is going to be in the description. But whether you join or not, I need you to hear this. Your needs matter. Your peace matters. Your time matters. And you don't need permission to protect them. You already have it. Now, you just need to use it. If this helps you, hit subscribe. I post a new video every Thursday. And if you know another woman who needs to hear this, send this to her, because boundaries are contagious. When one woman starts honoring herself, she gives permission to other women to do the same. I'll see you next week, and welcome to Awakened and Rising.